Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Dustin Miller. I am the marketing director and a technical education advisor for Max Technical Training. And I want to just thank you for your time and joining us. It's been through a lot of my experiences recently helping Ohio companies apply to Ohio TechCred that this workshop was created. We wanted to really put some visuals to the process and make it a lot easier for Ohio companies to apply to the TechCred program. And first, I would like to introduce Denise Bartik, the president and owner of Max Technical Training, who is with us. And we also have a couple of special guests that will be joining us today. Right now, we have Jonathan Jones, who is the Senior Manager, Corporate Training and Productivity Improvement with Mitsubishi. He has been a inspiration for companies that are making the full use out of the Ohio TechCred program. But for a moment, I would like to hand off to Denise Bartik to introduce the TechCred program and get us started with our presentation today. Real quick, just some administrative notes along the way. As you have any questions, please submit them into the chat. I will be monitoring the chat and getting those questions to the right individuals, and so you can get the responses that you need. And also, after the presentation, we will be putting together communication that will include a recording of today's event, and we'll also have a few documents that we'll be linking into the chat as well. So Denise, would you like to go ahead and introduce the TechCred program?
Yeah, but before we do that, I wanted to also introduce Derek Chancellor. Derek is and I may get this wrong, Derek, so please forgive me, the Southwest Ohio liaison to Lieutenant Governor Houston. That's a lot to say. How'd I do?
Correct.
I do.
That's it.
All right, good. So thank you for joining us. And he's a huge advocate of this program, and it's just by luck he's here too today. So you're welcome to ask him any questions too. You can say, why is this? And give him a hard time. Go ahead if you've used the program before. But before we get going, I wanted to just, thank all of you for being here today. I'm so excited about TechCred. And a little bit about Max before we get going. For those of you who are not familiar with Max, our mission is to really cultivate an ecosystem that enables tech education for all. And we've been in business for 26 years. I like to say I started the company when I was 16. But really, we have over 400 different courses. We've been tweaking, and that is not a static list. It's a very dynamic list that changes very often based on what our clients want. We provide education in everything from Microsoft Office, products like Excel, to Kubernetes and Python and ITIL and Agile and AI. So we've got a huge list of products. We provide those trainings to many different organizations, nonprofit entities, government entities, and small and very large corporations. We provide the training privately on site at a lot of our clients or in our open enrollment public schedule, so individuals can choose one class at a time. And in the last 15-ish years, we started really working with individuals that are going through a career change. So I think we can go to our next slide, Dustin. All right. Oh, nope. Thank you. All right. So today we want to cover a lot, and we're going to try to go as fast as we can, but we really want you to spend a little bit of the time with our guests and going through the application process. So today we really want you to leave here understanding what TechCred is and hopefully feeling comfortable about applying in the last application period this year in November. I'm going to define TechCred for you. And really, one thing that I do want folks to know, like I said, I'm super excited about TechCred. It was launched in October of 2019. And I have seen in my years, over 30 years in this business, so many programs come and go with the state. And this one by far is the best I have ever seen. In fact, it's so good that we see states throughout the United States trying to copy this program right now. So it's a fantastic program. So in the words of the state, the TechCred program is a workforce development initiative designed to help Ohioans earn industry-recognized technology-focused credentials. The funding for this program comes primarily from state resources allocated by the Ohio General Assembly. Specifically, the program is funded through Ohio's budget, where the state government allocates money for workforce development and educational initiatives. This program appropriates from the General Revenue Fund and other state resources aimed at supporting economic development and workforce readiness. The program may also receive support from federal funding streams dedicated to workforce training and education, though the primary funds come from the state funds. Ohio TechCred program is part of a broader effort by the state's administration to boost the skills of the workforce, particularly in the technology sector, to meet the demands of employers and support economic growth for the state. The allocation of these funds is determined by state legislative processes, including the budgetary provisions passed by the Ohio General Assembly. All right, let's go into the next slide. TechCred 101. So this is, if you get anything, get this slide. Each employer can be reimbursed for training up to $180,000 per year. There are 6 program periods that you can apply. They start in January. So January, March, I had to write these down, May, July, September, and the final one is November. In each of those 6 program periods, the employer can apply for up to $30,000 in each program round. Each credential or class, and don't be scared about the word credential. Each class can be reimbursed for up to $2,000 per class. Now, let me kind of break this down for you a little bit. During a program period, an employer can apply for up to $30,000. Each credential or class can be up to $2,000. So that means an employer can apply for 15 classes at $2,000 per period, or they can apply for 30 $1,000 classes during that period, or a mixture of all kinds of things. Classes can be anywhere from $350 per class to up to $3,000 per class. If the class is $3,000, the system will only reimburse the employer up to $2,000, and the employer is obligated to pay that $1,000. During a program application period, an employer can apply for one individual to take 15 classes at $2,000 each. Or they can say, hey, I have 15 people that are going to take a $2,000 class each. So it can be a mixture of things. And so what's important is to figure out what your organization wants and what do you need. And we're going to keep breaking these down into more details as we go. But I did want to pause. And one thing I did forget to say is that if you do have questions, please interrupt me, especially if they're about this slide, or go ahead and start to put those in the chat. One thing I do know about education in all my years is the more interactive we are in these programs, the more you're going to learn, the more we're all going to get out of it. Okay, you have a question?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
this is Will. Thank you. So you mentioned, so it's 30K a year, up to 2K per class. You've used 15 15 classes or something like that, but you also mentioned it could be for a lesser amount. Like, let's say the class was 500. Could we have 30 different people do a 500 course? 500
Yeah.
course?
Yes. One thing that you said, Will, it's not 30 per year. It's 30 per application
Or,
period.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And you can do 6 applications. So an employer doesn't just do 1 application, they can do all 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is another fallacy that we've heard from other organizations. They didn't realize they could do more than 1 application per year. But does that make sense? So you can choose a $500 class and whatever number that is.
Yeah, I think so. But so you
Yeah.
mentioned different applications. So would we have to do an application for each program? Or so there's 6 program periods a year. Basically, you're just saying we need 6 different applications a year.
Yes.
Okay, so every, I don't know, 2.5 months, we fill out another application.
Yes. So the first one started in January. The next one starts November 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll
Okay.
get a few more details there.
Okay,
Good
thank you.
question. Thank you. So let's talk about the success of TechCred. Now, these numbers, and Derek, you're welcome to chime in if there's updated numbers. This was as of the end of May. The state has paid for over 100,000 classes, i.e. credentials, for individuals in the state of Ohio. 100,000 classes have been taken. And the state has reimbursed companies over $114 million. That's a lot of money. And if you haven't participated in that, that's why we're saying, hey, get your piece of the pie here. Derek, do you have any updates on these numbers, or is this pretty accurate?
No, I think, yeah, the 100 million and $100,000 milestones were for us from last application period. So,
Okay.
in July alone, 6,000 credentials, over 6,700 credentials, and over 500 employers. So, we're seeing an uptick in participation, but yeah, it's still a very underutilized resource. And yeah, we're trying to get the word out about it. So the General Assembly has an appetite to fund this program time and again, and it's an effort to modernize our economy. And it's a win-win-win across the board. So we're excited about it.
Thank you. All right, good. All right, so I'm going to call on Jonathan from Mitsubishi to unmute, and we're going to ask you a few questions here. Is that okay? He's got to figure out how to unmute. There
Absolutely.
we go.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan. So Jonathan, let's just talk about your experience with TechCred. How did you get started? And I think you started at the very beginning, you told me.
Yeah. So we started around 2019. I don't remember the exact date. We've been called early adopters. I don't know if that's true.
I think you are.
I could go into a lot of why, but it was really why not for us. But I'm a big math person, so it's embarrassing to share this, but it was just the reality that we faced in 2019. Our salaried staff budget for training was around $500 a head. It may seem like a lot. That's a 3-year period. That's one class that we could offer our indirect or our salaried staff. And even more embarrassing than that, our hourly workers or our indirect or our direct workers was practically zero. We didn't have a budget for training. So we had to get very creative, and hopefully John will be able to join a little bit later. He found the program, and that was the main reason why we started. We didn't have a lot of funds. Now, we do have a training department in-house, but we can't offer all different types of technical training. We must go external just to keep up. And that was the main reason, is to use this as a supplement for our salaried worker, continued training in the technical fields, and then also our direct workers, because it may seem like it's only applicable in the indirect side or our salaried side, but we've been able to offer multiple credentials to our direct workers on the floor. So that was the main reason, was budgetary constraints. Again, I'm embarrassed to say that, but it's a reality for us, and it may be a reality for other businesses out there as well.
Jonathan, I think that is more common than you think. A lot of organizations have bought, a lot of e-learning packages, and they're like, well, we have this and just go do that or get the free stuff and good luck. So, so in your experience, what for using TechCred, what's your experience been in the using this program for really almost the whole time?
Yeah, nothing but positive. Any negative experience we've had is self-inflicted. It's just as we started and as you learn, you're going to have to, you should expect to have some snafus or some issues here and there. It's just a natural part of learning something new. But outside of that, it has been nothing but positive. And just for another math reference point, we just crossed the $500,000 threshold for free training across our location. So we started out quite slow. We weren't submitting up to the 30K per application period. We were not anywhere near to the 180K. So it was probably to get to that, we've probably been averaging 150 a year for the last couple of years. The first year was around, 30, 40. We were just learning, but once we had good experience with the process, we've been maxing out the application and not only requesting the credentials, we've been using them. And it started in our engineering and technical field, but as other departments caught wind, it's expanded to our IT department, it's expanded to our production leadership, it's expanded to our production direct workers. It really started out, and I don't want to say I would suggest that, but definitely as you're getting started, pick a department or pick an area that has a need or an immediate need and start small. And then once you learn, you'll be able to grow the applications more quickly. But yeah, it's been nothing but positive for us. And I think in prior sessions, one of the questions that I've received was, what's the ROI for this kind of program? And not being facetious or anything, but I say it's infinity because the return is the money that you get and the investment is basically zero. We use internal resources. So if you want to calculate it that way, it's fine. But for us, it's, 5 to 10 hours a month or every other month that we have to spend on it. And we, again, are $100,000 to $150,000 a year in free training. So that's been the experience so far.
And then I think I heard you say this once, Jonathan, what has changed in your organization as far as morale or how the workers, I mean, the ROI is part of that too, right?
Yeah, and I'll share a recent example, and this was from about a year ago. We had some production workers. We preach a lot of development and let your supervisor know if you want to be developed. And they were saying that in the past, right? In the past, I never mentioned that I wanted any development because the opportunity was never there. Like I would go talk to my supervisor and they would say, sorry, we don't have money. We can't do that. And so as an organization, how can you promote development skill up of your associates if you're not offering them something? So I think that's changed is that when people think about their own personal development, they're more willing to share, and then we can actually provide something to them. So I think our most gracious area is actually our production department, which is crazy. I mean, and we don't get, we're not providing technical training. It's basically Microsoft products, but that's what they use and are expected to use on a day-to-day basis. And they just didn't have the skill set. So I think we have more departments building confidence in themselves over the last 3 to 4 years and being more efficient and effective in their processes.
And that's hard to measure, except you just see it by people looking happy, just being happy in their jobs, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And we get more and more requests. So I see that as a word of mouth thing. So it's just,
Yeah.
I rarely can go a week without somebody reaching out and saying, hey, when's the next TechCred thing? Or when's the next training you're going to offer in Max? I really want to take that. So to me, that's one of the benefits that you can't really put a number on.
Very cool. And what are your words of wisdom on any of this with TechCred, or what would you want to say to the folks here?
Just do it. I mean, I know you're kind of stepping out of your comfort zone and doing a new process. And I will say, just to be honest, it's not a no work grant program. It's not like you don't have to provide any resources to do it. you do have to provide some resources. If John is on the call, he can be a little bit more detailed around how much time it is, but I think I mentioned before, it's probably, you know, maybe 10 to 15 hours as you're launching this thing and learning about it. And then once you get familiar with it, the application is maybe 4 to 5 hours to apply, because you are consulting with your organization and trying to figure out what courses you want to add and what the cost of the courses are. And then afterwards, for the reimbursement, yes, you have to collect some forms. Yes, you have to collect some certificates, and you have to make that application to get the reimbursement. So it's not like no time is required, but any hour that we spend on it is worth it. So it does take some resources, but we made the decision in 2019 that it was worth any time that we spent on it. So I would just say, maybe jump out of the comfort zone for a new process and give it a try, and get launched with it.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions for Jonathan? And we will have Q&A at the end too. So, and when John is here. So John actually does the application most of the time, right? Okay. And you'll hear more about that. Okay, great.
I have one quick question.
Okay.
Jonathan, how did you decide who was going to take what role? Because you're in a little bit of a larger company, and how did you decide who was going to do the application or who was going to do reimbursement? How did those discussions happen for your group?
Yeah, so I don't know if I acquired the training department back in 2019, and I was lucky because John was always out there looking for free money. He was trying to be creative and find ways to supplement. We did have some budget, as I mentioned before, but it wasn't enough. So he's always been active in grant programs. And if you have somebody within the organization that's familiar with grant programs and how they work, it may be best to tap into them at first before you decide. But I think you need one person to facilitate the grant program, and then you have to have buy-in from the department leaders, and they need to help you collect all the data. The person that's doing the application doesn't need to be the one that's going out and figuring out who needs to take what and what the cost is. You have to make the department managers accountable to understand their department, you know, what training is needed in that department, do the research for the credential itself and who's going to offer the credential, and let the application person be the application person and the reimbursement. So I was lucky because John was already doing that in his current role, and he just continued. And my job was to communicate it to the organization and decide who the leaders were that were going to be filtering that information to John to make the process work overall.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Denise, you ready for the next one?
Yep, let's go. All right, so overall, the process is fairly simple. There are four main steps, and we'll get into these in a little more detail as we go through this, the next, 30 minutes here. The individual who is applying needs to have an individual Ohio ID created. There's the employer application process, which Jonathan was just talking about. There's the credential or the class completion, where the students or the employees actually take the class and they have a credential completion certificate. And then you go through a reimbursement process. Let's talk about eligibility. So to be eligible for this program, the employer must have a physical Ohio address. We've had some companies that were based in Kentucky, but they also have an Ohio address. So they are eligible. They must be registered with the Ohio State Department as a business. And the employees that are taking the classes, and this is the key, must be Ohio residents, or they can be prospective Ohio residents. So it could be someone who's moving to Ohio, but they'll be here by the time they take the class. And because the credentials, once you get approval, they're good for 12 months. It could also be for employees you haven't hired yet. So you don't have to always know in advance who is going to take what class, but you just know, hey, we're going to need 10 people to take Excel training in the next 12 months, or we think we're going to have 5 people that are going to need to learn Python. So something like that. And then we like to say the employer needs to be able to do an investment upfront. So for example, Mitsubishi knows that they're going to have to spend the money first to pay for the program. Then the employees take the program and then they apply for reimbursement. Or sometimes the class is a little bit more than $2,000, like a $2,500 class, and that employer needs to be willing to invest the $500.
Any questions about eligibility so far, or the information we've covered in the last 2 slides? Because we're going to try to keep it moving.
Can you pop back to the other slide just for a second so I can screenshot the process?
We will be
That's it?
providing the video for today, and also I do have a link to our slide deck, which I can throw into the chat right now.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, and William, just so you know, there will be more of a detailed to-do list that you'll get even more detail than what you see here.
Yep.
Excellent.
All right, so this is my favorite slide. Because I got hung up on a credential. I thought, oh my gosh, this is a university thing. It's a big deal, but it's really not. A credential could be a Microsoft Excel class. So in the state's words, the term industry recognized means a credential that is sought or accepted by employers within the industry or sector involved as a recognized, preferred, or required credential for recruitment, screening, hiring, retention, or advancement purposes. A technology-focused credential prioritizes the development of digital skills or STEM-related technical skills for economic productivity. Examples of technology-focused credentials include those related to software development or utilization, advanced manufacturing and construction technologies, data analytics, cybersecurity, broadband, 5G technology, or other emerging fields like AI. I don't think that was even a big thing when this program started. And short-term must be completed in less than 12 months. So for example, the classes that Max has, I don't think we have one class that's over 5 days. So they all qualify and they're all short-term. So like Mitsubishi, you probably take advantage of some of the engineering classes and some of the manufacturing in addition to the IT classes that you get from Max. So it's really, think of the STEM programs and the STEM technologies. Any questions here? But credential is class, any class.
One thing to add is as I've sat down with individuals, especially those that have a significant IT background, I think the word credential traditionally is something that is multiple weeks or lasts longer and requires some testing at the end, and then you get to add some some acronym or some letters at the end of your signature, and it has a a market value to it to a degree. This is not exactly that type of credential, so we'll use the word course or class in that way, because you really just need to complete that class session, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and that will be something that can be approved.
And I was just going to add, there are some classes that include having a certification, like an ITIL certification or an Agile certification or a project management isn't part of this, but other certifications that could be part of these programs. And you don't have to get certified to get the credential completed. It could be a separate thing. So it doesn't need to be a certification, but it could be. All right. Any other questions? Do we have questions in the chat?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. So I think you were going to take this.
My turn? Ready?
I think it's your turn. Yeah.
Yeah, it is my turn.
Take this slide, or you? Okay, go
I've
ahead.
got this. So I've been working directly with companies, especially virtually, as they're filling out the application. So I want to provide you with the information you're going to need ahead of time. That way you don't miss the opportunity coming up in November, which is why we're doing the session today. You will need a payee ID number. And in each of these paragraphs, you can see where the link is to be able to visit to get this information. The payee ID number takes a number of days to receive, so it's not something you want to do in the last 2 days of a program period. But this is the number that is going to be the state's way of making sure you get your reimbursement. So you'll want to make sure to jump on that prior to the opening of the next session. And then you're going to need your Ohio charter number, which I will say, if you look at Ohio charter number in the business detail report, I've been finding the companies I've been working with, their charter number is in their business detail report. So if I go and do the business detail report search, if you visit that link and you search your company, you will find the document that you are looking for, and inside of that document is the Ohio charter number as well. So you can really do both of those at the same time, making things a lot easier. But make sure you save that business detail report, because we'll show you in some of the screenshots from the application process coming up that you're actually going to need to upload that document as a part of the process. And then you're also going to need your federal tax ID. So these are really the first pieces of information you're going to need to just begin the process to apply. I'll pause there real quick. I know that's kind of throwing a lot at you all at once, but does anybody have any questions about really the company's critical information that is absolutely required to apply? Feel free to go ahead and throw those into the chat. I'm going to keep moving along so we can make sure to cover everything, and I'll check for questions in a moment. And this is the first page. And again, this is where that information is going to start to be placed in your application process. The first tab as you go on to the TechCred Apply site is the applicant information. And so you will input your federal tax ID, confirm some of the questions they have here, like are you a government entity, the business name, office or department, and then just checking if this has been verified with the Ohio Secretary of State office. This is going to be the first section of that page. And on the next section, this is where you're going to see where you'll upload your business detail report, provide your charter number, and your payee ID. One thing I want to note as this part of the process, you'll see even in my screenshot, the business detail report upload functionality is grayed out. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to fill out all of the information on this page first. Click Save so that all of your progress is saved. Once you click the Save button, you'll actually scroll back up to this Drop Files section right here in this box that's a little harder to see. And this is where you will end up uploading that business detail report. But you will want to hit Save first before that's available. And then to finish off the business information portion of the application, you will utilize or potentially not one of the checkboxes, and then provide the basic address and the business information, including the number of full-time employees. And I think this is what Jonathan was talking about as you get started. It's going to be, 5 to 10 hours of collecting these things, filling out this part of the process. I will tell you, when someone has all of their information and we do this for the very first time and I'm doing it with them, I've seen it where it's, they're applying for 5 or 6 classes for 3 or 4 people. We typically get through this in about 45 minutes to an hour at most. So this actual part of the process is quite efficient, but I think what Jonathan was speaking to is a lot of the legwork and information collection around that. Would you agree with that, Jonathan?
Yes, I would. Yep.
Perfect. So now let's move on. And again, they're going to ask for the business contact information. And this is a discussion that even Denise and I had on who should be the business contact information. And Jonathan, feel free to jump in on how you guys aligned who was going to do this. But the way we look at this is for approvals, for state communication, for process communication, this is going to be the person that's going to be keeping tabs on all of the communication coming in, making sure submissions happen correctly, and just kind of being that focal point of all of the conversation between you and the state. And then I'm going to skip that slide and we're just going to go directly to actually now putting in for your training plan. This is, if you look at the top, you've got your applicant information and then you have your training plan, which I've got to say, I love that word, because versus just credential selection, this is really more of a training plan. When you look at the categories, they have the credential name, reimbursement amount, and I'm looking right here in the blue box with the titles in this grid. Number of employees, whether incumbent or prospective, total number of employees. You really are, when you start to fill these out with all of the courses and aligning how many employees for those courses, you are creating a training plan essentially for your company. And I think that's an underrated and valuable tool for each organization. And so here you will add a credential, and then you will tell that credential how many requests you're going to have, how many individuals are going to attend that course. You may have 3, you may have 5. At this point, you do not need to tell the state or the system exactly which employee. We'll get into that later, more around reimbursement, but right now it's just the basic number of how many employees. And so here under the credential title, you will select the credential that you are looking for. This credential will be completed, and this is virtual or in person. It's just the delivery style. So I will tell you, as I am helping people fill this out, I always am watching their screen that they're sharing with me, but I also have the TechCred page open, and I also have our Max pages open so that I can pull this information if the individual setting this up doesn't have it readily available. But I do recommend that they kind of capture those URLs for the courses that they want to take and kind of, keep those saved into a document, and that'll make this a lot easier. And then down here is where you'll put the total training cost for the course. So for us, everything is included in the cost of the course when we put the price up there. So if it's $350, you'll put $350. And then the actual cost per person is still $350. And then the reimbursement amount, this is where it's actually going to look at the total, and is there going to be additional contribution that you're going to need to make. You will also need to provide who the training provider is that you've selected to take these courses from. This does not lock you into that training provider, but in this space, you will let the state know that you have looked at who is going to provide, who can provide the training, and that you know who you can get the training from. I'm going to pause real quick because I feel like I just covered a lot. Does anybody have any questions about the applicant information or training plan sections of the TechCred application process? So Charlene asked, how do you know when the company needs to contribute? So you have per person, per course, up to $2,000. So if you should know while you're shopping courses, and hopefully working with someone like us in an organization that can provide some more clarity, if the course is $2,500 and you have 3 people taking that course, the company contribution is going to be $1,500 because each one is $500 over. So in this case down here, you're going to put the total cost per person. So let's say it's $2,500. And the actual cost is $2,500, because I think here they're trying to include lab fees, manuals, any additional costs. And so here, what it's going to basically, this site is just doing the math for you. And it's letting you know, based on the cost of the course, based on the number of individuals, you're looking at this much over $2,000 per course that you're going to be responsible for when it comes to, you just won't get reimbursed for that amount when it comes to the reimbursement process. Denise, did you want to add anything into this?
No, that's what I was going to say. In that middle column there on the, there is going to be calculating your total. So if you had, like in Dustin's example, 3 $2,500 classes that you've just entered into the system, that total there will be $6,000, and the total that you'll have to contribute will be now $1,500. And that'll keep calculating until you get to the total reimbursement of 30,000, or you don't have any more classes that you want to apply for.
And then after you provide that information about the credentials, this is just kind of zooming in at the trainee. This is how many incumbent or prospective employees, total number of employees that will earn the credential, and then it'll just do this math again here for you. And I highly recommend every step of the way and as many times as possible, continue to hit save. You never know what may happen, a window may close, but just continue to hit save as you go through the process. And then we'll jump in here to where the red submit button comes into place, because right before you submit your application, and you don't have to submit until you're ready. You can continue building this day after day throughout the program open period and continue to save until you've either hit that $30,000 mark or you are 100% sure you have brought in all of the courses and individuals that you want to be able to get training approved for within the next 12 months, and to take within the next 12 months. And you can submit this at any time during that program open period, but you can hit save and continue to edit these before you submit, because once you submit, that is more of a final step in the process. But this is really just agreeing to terms and conditions, the program guidelines, and just really just kind of signing off on what it is that you're going to submit. And even here, I would still hit save before submit, and just as a habit, because I think it's a good habit. And then once you are ready to fully apply, then you will finally hit the submit button to submit your application to the state. Now, as far as reimbursement, we're just going to go over this real quick, and then we'll get into our Q&A. We are looking at actually doing a reimbursement workshop as well, but in its most basic form, you're going to need proof that the credential has been completed, that the person took the course. You're going to need to complete a document, and that is the state's employment verification form. And you will need to complete one of those per individual that is taking the course. You'll need to complete that because it will need to contain a lot of the information that's here in the 4th bullet point. But you are also going to need itemized invoices from the company that you've taken the training from, as well as proof of payment, which in most cases is actually a bank statement showing the actual transaction of the payment being made. When we get to the Q&A, Jonathan, I'm definitely going to ask you about that part of the process, and if you have that information to talk about that. And then you are going to need, when you fill out the information for each participant, you are going to need, of course, their full name, the last 4 of their social security number, their date of birth, their county of residence in Ohio, and then just for pure, I believe, data collection and understanding the success of the program, it is not a requirement to show change here, but they would like to see the wage before and after completing the credential, which that wage can be the same. But I think this is a really smart collection of data that the state is doing, because I think it's really interesting what they're going to find as the program goes along. Denise, did you want to add anything on reimbursement?
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't be worried about the wage. And because we've seen people just really put in, okay, they're making $25 an hour now, and they're going to be making $25 an hour after the class or whatever it is. And that has not affected any reimbursement in the whole time I've seen this. So don't think that is a trick question, or you've got to show that they've increased their wages just to get reimbursed. I feel like it's kind of in the wrong place, but it's there. So that's just my opinion.
But it still could be very valuable information to show later on, and especially if there has to be a conversation for the longevity of the program, I think that also could be critical. And just so you guys know, what we've seen recently at Max especially is Some of our most popular TechCred approved credentials are in Office 365, the Suite, the Power Apps, Microsoft's Copilot now, CompTIA, Azure, machine learning, data analytics, Power BI, a lot of Excel, Agile, Scrum, Safe, ITIL. You can ping this QR code here, but I actually will send over a document as well that has the resource that's linked. You can click on it and you can go and check out our TechCred page. And just so that you know, if you find a course that is not in the TechCred website as approved, you can apply for that course in the application process for the state to approve it with knowing what we said a credential was: technology focused, industry focused, short term. As long as it meets those criteria, and this list just continues to grow, I think program period after program period, which is awesome. But right now, these are some of the more popular courses and credentials that we are finding companies are looking for in a very, this is really a small portion of our lineup of IT advanced training courses that you could look for. Let me go ahead, and we've got a couple of questions that came into the chat. So let's jump into our Q&A. We did real good on our time today. I'm quite proud of us, and I'd love to hear more from either Jonathan or Derek. But let me go to Charlene's question real quick. And so Charlene asked, so all 6 periods are covered on the same application. So Charlene, 6 application periods per year, beginning with January. They happen every other month in the year, and we are coming to our last one in November. You can apply for up to $30,000 in technical training every single period. That can be for up to a total of $180,000 a year in technical training. And so no, the 6 periods are not covered all in the same application. Let's go with an example. If you apply in November and you are approved, you have 12 months to complete the courses as a part of that approval. And then you can submit for reimbursement 1 time per month is the preference. Once a month, you can submit for reimbursement. So I have someone that I just worked with. Based on the schedule, they were able to complete 3 of the courses already, but they're going to have to wait for 2 more until January. They already have the approval for all of them, but if they wanted to get that reimbursement for the first 3 sooner rather than waiting till January, they can apply, they can submit for that reimbursement. And then in February, after they've completed those next 2 courses, submit for reimbursement on those 2 courses in February. And so there's really 6 opportunities to apply throughout the year. And then your next question, the payment for the course does not have to be made by the individual, but the payment of the course does need to occur to match whoever the training provider is. And then the company is then responsible for the reimbursement process and using that payee ID created with the state to get the reimbursement back in the funding for the training that you've taken. But no, it does not have to be by the individual.
And I'll just chime in. We've seen some companies say we prefer to pay for it ourselves versus we had a consulting firm where all the consultants were paying for the training with their credit card. And then the company was going their one designated person going for reimbursement, but then they had to go after each of those individuals to get their credit card statements and all that stuff. And then they finally said, you know, we're just going to do this ourselves and do this for you versus having the individuals apply and pay for it themselves. I see Jonathan nodding his head. Been there, done that, huh? Yeah. It's really up to your organization and what process you want to go through.
And then Charlene had one more question. Are there any limits on which providers or instructors are used? On the TechCred site, if you search for certain courses and credentials, you will see that the state has already aligned approved training providers for those courses.
And I'll add that this is really employer driven. So if you do see a provider that is not listed there, you can go ahead and still apply and list that provider. And that provider will probably get approved by the state as long as they're a legitimate business and all that other stuff. But this is not driven by the training providers. This is driven by the employers.
And so I'll open it up to any other questions. Does anybody else have questions for Jonathan, for Derek, or any of our guests, or about the application process? We've got about 6 minutes left. And like I said, just to remind you, we will be sending out email communication with links to the video for today. And also one other document I'm going to throw into our chat right now is the state, I'm going to call it the state document. I send this to anybody looking to apply. There is a very, very good PDF from the state on the entirety of the process, and I highly recommend you download this and keep a copy of it. We've covered a lot of it today. But any other questions that anyone has about applying, or if anybody, is anyone considering applying in the November period? You can feel free to unmute, join us in conversation.
Just got to do further investigation. It's something I'd like to get started.
William, you just muted yourself.
Sorry. November period is awfully soon, but this is something that, I'd like us to take advantage of for some cybersecurity courses.
And I'll encourage any of you to reach out to us. We're happy to help go through this initial process and start early. Dustin is available to sit with you. That we don't charge for this, and whether you take classes or not at max, it doesn't matter. So we just want to see people use the program. We think it's great.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Dustin,
Yeah.
if you don't mind, one other piece of advice, I think it's more connected to the payment and reimbursement, is go find your best friend in accounting and finance and have a conversation with them. It's best to do that up front. We did not do that up front, but what we found out was, I think Denise, as you said, once we decided to control all the payments and reimbursement, accounting worked with us very closely to set up an account. All the payment goes out of the account, all the reimbursement goes into the same account, and we're able to do that balancing. Now, there are some cases where we'll pay for it directly. They'll have invoices for an entire class issued to us. So it's very difficult to commonize all the payments for all the classes, but we do as much as we possibly can. But having that key contact in accounting that can help design a process that's the most streamlined for that payment and reimbursement will definitely help you out in the long run.
What is Jonathan, what is the reaction from either leadership or those that maybe were not involved in making this happen, but are seeing the positive benefits of the decisions you guys have made to get involved with the program? What have you heard from leadership about what they've seen from what you guys have been able to do?
Yeah, well, I mentioned accounting, they love it. And I think that's part of the reason why they supported this so heavily, is because we're able to do all this training with definitely a reduced cost to the company. But, luckily our plant manager has an HR background and knows the importance of this, but that really doesn't matter. The fact that we're providing opportunity for skill up for our associates without many limitations was very, very easy for them to buy in to that and get behind it. So we don't have to do a lot of marketing around here, because it's kind of in the last 5 years, it's become a well-known fact. People use TechCred as common terminology in the company right now. So I think that says enough kind of by itself.
For any company, and I think I've overheard this in conversations multiple times now, that some companies fear upskilling, or like you say, skill up to a point that maybe other opportunities become available. And you've been doing this for so long now, and really building into people as a cultural thing. Has retention been better?
That's tough to say. People leave for so many different reasons, especially in 2024. But, you know, I would say they're more willing to stay if the company is willing to invest in them. And I'll be honest, the associates don't always know that we're getting reimbursed for this. Now, I don't keep it a secret, but all they see is the company is making an investment in our development. And I'm going to use the word reskilling. We had a skill gap. We had a skill gap from associates to be able to do the job that they get paid for. It wasn't necessarily that we were skilling them up beyond their position. Our first goal was to close the existing skill gap that they had. They were asked to do work that they didn't have the strong enough skill set to do. So our focus over the first 3 or 4 years was to close that gap. Now we're getting to the point to where we have supervisors coming to us saying, I want to be an assistant manager. I want to, you know, develop in the company. These are the type of trainings I want to get there. But our first 3 to 4 years was really closing our existing skill gap. And now we're moving more towards futuristic type of expectations for each of our associates.
That's awesome. Well, with 1 minute left, I want to make sure that we can thank everybody for joining us today. Jonathan, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you sharing in your experience. I think it's really the most impactful thing that people can take from our presentation today. Thank you, Derek, for joining us as always. More than willing to provide us with your time. And Denise, do you want to say anything or closing remarks? And keep in mind, if you're ready, we will help you with the next application period on November 1st.
Yeah, all I would say is just stick your big toe in and give it a try. Get, you know, even if you do one class and doesn't hurt. So it's a great program, and I appreciate the state for investing in Ohioans. It's fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, listen, we've hit the end of our time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As I said, we'll be following up with some information and link to the video for today in an email. You'll probably see that tomorrow, I would expect. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. And I hope that you learned a lot today.